in modeling uh, human and firm behavior and modeling micro markets, etc. Um, Economists have to make some broad assumptions before they construct their models. For instance, um, the best model is life itself. The problem is it's not we can't get any useful information out of life. Think about it. Okay, so we have 300 plus million people in the United States. Uh, Life itself would then involve at least 300 plus million models, because all of us are different. Furthermore, our consumption behavior and decision making process may be different on a Monday than it is on a Thursday, and therefore we would need a different model for every individual for every day of the week. Um, and lastly, our decision making process is probably different in the morning just after we wake up than it is at night when we get home from school or work. And so we would need a different model for different times of day, for different days of the week, for every individual in the United States. In other words, we're talking about an infinite number of models that we would need to model life. So that's just not practical. So economists, in order to be able to analyze behavior and scarcity choices, etc., we do have to make some very broad assumptions. One of the primary assumptions we make is that people are rational. And by rational, we mean that they make choices using all available resources most efficiently to obtain their objective. Now, that is going to be a different definition of rational thinking than, for instance, a sociologist or an anthropologist would consider as rational. In many circles, rational behavior coincides with a sort of ethical behavior. For instance, someone murders someone for $1.50. Well, sociologically, that's just not rational. You just took a human life for $1.50. Um, uh, Having said that, an economist, personally, they may have a judgment about that behavior. But in terms of economics itself, we wouldn't declare whether that was actually rational or not. In fact, what we would analyze is, did this person use all their resources most efficiently to achieve their desired end? And if their end was, for instance, to, in terms of say, a robbery and killing someone over $1.50, well, the objective wasn't to get money, believe it or not. Their desired end was probably to get away with the crime. And in getting away with it, if that was their primary objective, did they use all their available resources most efficiently then to get away with it? In other words, if this robber robbed someone for $1.50 and he did it in broad daylight and he used a gun out in the middle of a public area, well, that's not too rational, because there are other ways they could have done it that didn't draw as much attention to themselves. In other words, they weren't being efficient in their allocation or their use of the resources. Um, and we also, more importantly, we have to make. I have to point out this word most. When we're talking about using all available resources most efficiently to achieve to attain an objective, we're not talking about kind of efficiently. We're not talking about using my available resources sort of efficiently. We're literally talking about most efficiently. And this is important because many people call economics the dismal science for many reasons. But one of those reasons is the fact that we assume everyone's rational in our models. And that's interesting because that throws people off, because even according to our definition of rational behavior, which is the efficient use of resources, um, clearly many people don't follow this. Many people don't use their available resources most efficiently. And so people would argue that, well, economics is just this highbrow theoretical modeling methodology that doesn't have any application in reality. But again, the reason why we assume this is because reality would require an infinite number of models. Furthermore, when you think about all levels of irrational behavior, some irrational behavior is far more irrational than other irrational behavior is. And so you would have to in order to model reality, you would have to model all different levels of irrational behavior. But this word most allows, there's only one level of efficiency if you're most efficient. Again, we're not kind of efficient, we're not sort of efficient, we're most efficient. In other words, we only need one model to model rational behavior or the rational individual. And I contend that we're actually modeling reality when we use that one unrealistic model to model that rational individual who we know rarely exists in society today. And the reason why I contend that we're actually modeling irrationality is because when we model rational behavior, it's going to give us a certain outcome. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Okay? Well, any deviation from that outcome in reality means that whatever we see in reality is necessarily irrational. So we have a model, the model projects an outcome, 2 plus 2 equals 4, but in reality, if 2 plus 2 equals 5, then we know it's not rational. Okay? So by modeling rational behavior, we're actually modeling reality itself, because any deviation from the outcome that model predicts is necessarily an irrational outcome. The next thing we assume, which is a broad assumption, is that rational choices are made on the margin. Now, margin typically means something like border, okay, or edge, okay. And all this means is that we make choices, a rational person makes choices incrementally, okay. For instance, let me give you a for instance. Assume you're at home in your kitchen, and you've got a bunch of people coming over, and there's just two of you working in the kitchen to produce food to feed these people coming over. And assume it's a bunch of people for a party, 50, 60 people coming over. Well, the two of you can only produce enough food for 20 people, okay? The question is, if you have to feed, say, 60 people, how many more people would you need to add to the kitchen effort in order to produce the food for the 60 people? Well, a lot of people would say, well, if 2 people can make 20 units, that's 10 units per person. We would need to bring in 4 more people to make up the other 40 units. However, that would actually be incorrect, okay? And the reason is because the kitchen is a fixed space, okay? The kitchen is a fixed space, okay? If as I have 2 people in here, they're free to kind of, move around the kitchen and do what they need to do and be productive. But as I start to add more people to that kitchen space, it becomes more crowded. Every additional person that I add, their productivity level will actually be less than the productivity level of the person that I added before them. And the reason is because the confined space becomes more crowded. They start stepping all over each other and they become less productive. Meaning that if I add 4 people to this kitchen production process, I will not get the additional 40 units that I need to feed 60 people. So I would have to add more than 4 people to get to that objective of feeding 60 people in this case. Case in point, if anyone has ever heard someone say, or you yourself have said at your job site, we are constantly understaffed, we are always understaffed. Well, that's a manager that is not making a rational choice about staffing their particular area. They are making this exact mistake, okay? Because a rational manager would never be under or would not be understaffed on a permanent basis. They would be properly staffed. Now there may be times when demand for the product kicks up and they have to they get a little bit behind. But on average, a rational thinking manager making rational choices will not be understaffed on an ongoing basis. An irrational manager will, however.